The old community center on Maple Street had seen better days. Paint was peeling off the walls, and some of the windows had tape holding cracked glass together. But inside the main hall, something magical was happening. Kids from all over the neighborhood were getting ready for the biggest event of the year, the annual talent show. 8-year-old Lily Chen stood in the far corner of the room, watching everything with wide eyes. She had her back pressed against the wall, trying to make herself as small as possible. Her mom had dropped her off just 20 minutes ago, telling her to go make some friends and have fun. But Lily didn't feel like having fun. She felt nervous and out of place. The other kids all seemed to know each other. They were laughing and talking in groups, showing off their talents to each other. There was a boy juggling 3 tennis balls, twin sisters practicing a dance routine, and a girl with a fancy violin case who kept talking about her private music teacher. But what caught Lily's attention more than anything else was the beautiful black piano sitting right in the middle of the room. It was huge and shiny, nothing like the old broken keyboard she had at home. This piano looked like something from a movie, the kind rich people had in their living rooms. Lily couldn't take her eyes off it. She had been playing music for as long as she could remember, but not on anything fancy like this. Had a small electronic keyboard that her mom had bought at a yard sale 3 years ago. Half the keys didn't work anymore, and it made weird buzzing sounds sometimes. But Lily loved it anyway. She had taught herself how to play by listening to songs on the radio and trying to copy them. When her mom worked late shifts at the diner, Lily would sit in their tiny apartment and practice for hours. She didn't have any music books or a teacher. She just played what sounded right to her. Her mom always said she had a gift. "You hear music differently than other people, sweetheart," she would tell Lily while making dinner. "That's something special." But looking around this room full of kids with expensive instruments and professional lessons, Lily didn't feel special at all. She felt poor and underprepared. The piano seemed to be calling to her, though. Every few minutes, she would take a tiny step closer to it. She could see the keys from where she stood, all white and black and perfectly arranged. It would feel like to press them, to hear the rich, full sound that only a real piano could make. A girl with perfectly curled blonde hair was now sitting at the piano bench, playing something that sounded very complicated. Her fingers moved quickly across the keys, and she had a serious expression on her face, like she was performing at a concert. Other kids had gathered around to watch her, nodding and whispering about how good she was. "That's Rebecca," Lily heard. "Someone say she's been taking lessons since she was 4. Parents pay like $200 a month for her piano teacher." $200 a month. Lily's heart sank a little. That was more money than her mom spent on groceries. There was no way they could ever afford something like that. When Rebecca finished playing, everyone clapped. She stood up and took a little bow, smiling proudly. "Thank you," she said, in a voice that sounded very grown-up. That was Chopin's Minute Waltz. It's quite advanced for someone my age. Lily didn't know what a minute waltz was, but it had sounded beautiful. She found herself taking another step toward the piano, drawn by curiosity and longing. The room was getting more crowded now, as more kids arrived for practice. There was a lot of noise, people talking, laughing, and practicing their acts. Somehow, the piano seemed to create a quiet space around itself, like it was waiting for something. Ms. Rodriguez, the community center director, was walking around the room with a clipboard, talking to different kids about their performances. She was a kind woman with graying hair and a warm smile. Lily had met her briefly when her mom signed her up for the talent show. "All right, everyone," Ms. Rodriguez called out, clapping her hands to get attention. "We have about an hour of practice time left. If you need to use the piano, please sign up on this sheet so everyone gets a fair turn." Lily watched as several kids rushed over to write their names down. Rebecca was already signing up for a second slot. A boy with a trumpet was asking if he could use the piano for accompaniment. Everyone seemed to have a plan, a purpose, a reason to be there. Lily looked down at her own hands. They were small and a little rough from helping her mom with chores at home. Her nails were short and practical, not long and painted like some of the other girls. She didn't have sheet music or a fancy instrument case. She just had herself and the music that lived in her head. But that music was always there, flowing through her thoughts like a river. Even now, standing in this crowded room, she could hear melodies that wanted to be played. Her fingers were itching to touch those piano keys. To bring the sounds in her mind to life, she took another step forward, and then another. The piano was only about 10 feet away now. She could see the reflection of the fluorescent lights on its polished surface. It was even more beautiful up close. A few kids noticed her moving toward the piano, but most were too busy with their own practice to pay attention. Lily was used to being invisible anyway. School, she was the quiet kid who sat in the back and didn't cause trouble. Teachers liked her because she did her homework and didn't disrupt class. But she didn't have many friends. Music was different. Though when Lily played music, she felt like herself in a way she never did anywhere else. The melodies seemed to pour out of her naturally, without effort or thought. It was like breathing, but prettier. She was only 5 feet away from the piano now. She could smell the wood polish and see the tiny scratches on the bench where countless people had sat to play. Her heart was beating fast, partly from nervousness, and partly from excitement. What would it feel like to sit at that bench? To put her hands on those keys and feel the weight of them, the resistance that her broken keyboard at home couldn't provide? What would her music sound like on a real piano, with real resonance and real depth? Lily glanced around the room. Most people were still busy with their own things. Ms. Rodriguez was helping the juggling boy with his routine. Rebecca was talking to her friends about her upcoming performance. The twin dancers were arguing about their choreography. Maybe she could touch just one key. Just to see what it felt like. Just to hear one note on a real piano. She took the final steps forward, her sneakers silent on the polished floor. The piano towered above her now, magnificent and intimidating. Lily reached out one small finger and gently touched middle C. The note rang out clear and pure, filling the air around her with beautiful sound. It was nothing like her keyboard at home. Its note had weight and richness and seemed to hang in the air like a small miracle. For just a moment, Lily closed her eyes and smiled. This was what music was supposed to sound like. The beautiful note from middle C was still echoing in the air when Lily heard a sharp laugh behind her. She quickly pulled her hand back from the piano keys as if they had burned her fingers. Oh my goodness, look everyone. Came a voice that sounded both sweet and mean at the same time. Little Lily thinks she can play the piano. Lily's stomach dropped as she turned around. Rebecca was standing there with 3 other girls, all of them looking at her with amused expressions. Rebecca's blonde curls bounced as she shook her head, and her pink lip gloss caught the light as she smiled in a way that wasn't friendly at all. I mean, it's cute that she's trying, Rebecca continued, loud enough for other kids to hear. This is a real piano, not a toy from the dollar store. The other girls giggled. One of them, a tall girl with braces named Chloe, stepped forward. Rebecca's right. You need years and years of proper training to even touch a piano like this. My mom says you can damage expensive instruments if you don't know what you're doing. More kids were starting to notice the commotion now. The boy with the juggling balls had stopped practicing and was looking over. The twin dancers had paused their routine. Even some of the parents who were sitting in chairs along the wall were starting to pay attention. Lily felt her cheeks getting hot. She wanted to say something, to defend herself, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. She had always been shy, and now with everyone looking at her, she felt smaller than ever. I was just ... She started to say, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. Just what? Asked another girl named Ashley, who had violin case covered in sparkly stickers. Just pretending you know how to play? This piano is worth more than most people's cars. You can't just come in here and bang on it like it's nothing. I wasn't banging on it, Lily managed to say, a little louder this time. I only touched one key. Rebecca rolled her eyes dramatically. 1 key, 10 keys. What's the difference? You don't even know how to sit properly at a piano bench. Look at your posture. Lily looked down at herself. She was wearing her best jeans and a clean t-shirt. But next to Rebecca's fancy dress and shiny shoes, she felt shabby and out of place. Her sneakers had a small hole near the toe that she hoped nobody would notice. My teacher says that proper Piano posture takes months to learn, Rebecca continued, enjoying the attention she was getting from the growing crowd. And that's before you even start learning to read music. Do you even know what these are? She pointed to some sheet music on the piano stand. The pages were covered with black dots and lines that looked like a secret code to Lily. She had never learned to read music. Everything she played came from listening and feeling, not from books. Those are eighth notes and quarter notes, Rebecca said when Lily didn't answer. And that's a treble clef. Basic stuff that any real piano player would know. But I guess they don't teach that at ... She looked around mockingly. Where exactly do you take lessons? The question hung in the air like a trap. Lily knew that if she told the truth, that she didn't take lessons anywhere, that she taught herself on a broken keyboard, it would only make things worse. But she also couldn't lie, especially with everyone staring at her. I learn at home, she said quietly. At home? Chloe laughed. What, on YouTube? That's not real training? My piano teacher went to college for music. She has certificates on her wall and everything. Mine too, chimed in Ashley. She says that learning piano the wrong way can actually hurt your fingers and make you develop bad habits that are impossible to fix later. By now, most of the kids in the room had stopped what they were doing to watch the scene unfold. Could feel dozens of eyes on her, and she wished more than anything that she could just disappear. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. You know what? Rebecca said, walking closer to the piano. Since you're so interested in this piano, maybe you should know some basic facts about it. This is a Yamaha Grand piano. It cost the community center $15,000. It's probably more money than your family sees in a whole year. The comment hit Lily like a slap. Rebecca was probably right about the money, but hearing it said out loud in front of everyone made Lily's eyes start to burn with tears. She was determined not to cry. Rebecca, that's enough, said a quiet voice from across the room. It was David, a boy who was about Lily's age, and usually kept to himself. But Rebecca was on a roll now, and didn't seem to hear him. I'm just trying to help her understand, Rebecca said with fake sweetness. Playing piano isn't just about pressing keys and hoping for the best. It's an art form. It takes dedication and discipline, and, most importantly, proper instruction. Yeah, added Chloe. My teacher says that people who try to teach themselves usually end up sounding terrible because they don't know any better. They think they're playing music, but it's really just noise. That comment stung worse than all the others combined. Music wasn't just noise to Lily. It was the most important thing in her world. It was how she expressed feelings she didn't have words for. It was how she made sense of things when life felt confusing or sad. To hear someone call it just noise felt like they were attacking something sacred. Maybe you should stick to things that are more, Rebecca paused, pretending to think of the right word, more your level. I think they have a karaoke machine in the other room. It might be fun for you. Some of the kids laughed at this, though a few looked uncomfortable with how mean Rebecca was being. Ms. Rodriguez was across the room helping someone with a magic trick and hadn't noticed what was happening yet. Lily felt trapped. Behind her was the beautiful piano that had called to her just minutes ago. In front of her was a semicircle of kids who were making her feel like she didn't belong here, like she was foolish for even trying. The thing is, Rebecca continued, clearly enjoying herself now, playing piano looks easy when you watch someone who actually knows what they're doing. But it's not. It's complicated and difficult, and it takes years to get good at it. You can't just walk up to a piano and expect to sound like anything other than a beginner. Some of us have been playing since we were 4 years old, Ashley added. We've had hundreds of lessons and spent thousands of hours practicing. Makes you think you could just figure it out on your own? The words kept coming, each one making Lily feel smaller and more foolish. She started to back away from the piano, ready to retreat to her corner and maybe even leave the community center. Entirely. Maybe she could call her mom to come pick her up early. Maybe she could say she felt sick, but then something inside her stirred. It was quiet at first, like a small flame, but it grew stronger as she thought about all the hours she had spent at her little keyboard at home. It's all the melodies that had poured out of her heart and through her fingers. All the times music had been her comfort and her joy. These kids didn't know anything about her or her music. They only saw her clothes and her shy demeanor and made assumptions about what she could or couldn't do. But they had never heard her play. They had never felt the music that lived inside her, as the laughter and comments continued around her. Lily found herself looking back at the piano. Those keys were still there, still waiting. And somewhere deep inside her chest, she could feel her heart beating in rhythm with a melody that wanted to be born. The laughter was getting louder now, and Lily could feel her face burning with embarrassment. Rebecca was still talking, saying something about how real piano players needed to understand music theory and finger positioning. But Lily wasn't really listening anymore. All she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat and a melody that seemed to be calling to her from somewhere deep inside, just as she was about to turn away from the piano completely. A firm but gentle voice cut through the noise. "What's going on here?" Everyone turned to see Ms. Rodriguez walking toward them, her clipboard tucked under her arm and a concerned expression on her face. She was a small woman, probably in her 50s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She had been running the community center for over 10 years and had seen just about everything. "Oh, hi, Ms. Rodriguez," Rebecca said quickly, her voice suddenly much sweeter. "We were just explaining to Lily about how the piano works. You know, so she doesn't accidentally damage it or anything." Ms. Rodriguez looked from Rebecca to Lily, taking in the situation. She had been working with kids long enough to recognize when someone was being picked on, even when it was disguised as helping. "I see," Ms. Rodriguez said slowly. "And what exactly were you explaining?" "Well," Rebecca continued, clearly thinking. "She was being helpful. We were telling her about how piano is really complicated and requires years of professional training. I mean, look at this instrument. It's not something you can just play around with." Ms. Rodriguez nodded, but her eyes stayed on Lily. She noticed how the young girl's shoulders were hunched forward, how she was staring at the floor, how her hands were clenched into small fists at her sides. "And what do you think about that, Lily?" Lily looked up, surprised that Ms. Rodriguez was asking for her opinion. Most adults just listened to whatever the louder, more confident kids had to say. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a small, squeaky sound came out. "It's okay," Ms. Rodriguez said gently. "Take your time. I just wanted to hear what it sounded like," Lily whispered. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble." "You didn't cause any trouble, sweetheart," Ms. Rodriguez said, and there was something in her voice that made several of the kids shift uncomfortably. "In fact, I think it's wonderful that you're interested in the piano. Do you play?" Before Lily could answer, Rebecca jumped in. "She says she learns at home, but she doesn't take real lessons or anything. She doesn't even know how to read music." "I see," Ms. Rodriguez said again. But this time, there was a slight edge to her voice. That made Rebecca stop talking. "You know, Rebecca, some of the most beautiful music in the world has been created by people who never had formal training. Music comes from the heart, not from certificates on a wall." Rebecca's face flushed a little. She wasn't used to being corrected by adults, especially not in front of other kids. Ms. Rodriguez turned back to Lily. "You know what? I think we should give you a chance to show us what you can do. Would you like that?" Lily's eyes went wide. "Me? I mean, I'm not... not what?" Ms. Rodriguez asked kindly. "Not good enough," Lily finished in a voice so quiet that people had to lean in to hear her. "Who told you that?" Ms. Rodriguez asked, though she already knew the answer. She looked around at the group of kids, and several of them suddenly found their shoes very interesting. "Well, I mean," Lily stammered, "they're right. I don't have fancy lessons or anything. I just play what sounds good to me." "With that?" Ms. Rodriguez asked. "Some of the greatest musicians in history played what sounded good to them. They felt the music in their hearts and let it flow through their fingers."
"Oh, Rebecca,"
made a small, scoffing sound. "But, Ms. Rodriguez, you need proper technique and training. My teacher always says your teacher is absolutely right about the importance of good technique." Ms. Rodriguez interrupted gently but firmly. "But technique without heart is just showing off. And heart without technique can still be beautiful. Music." She turned back to Lily, who was still looking uncertain. "What do you say, honey? Would you like to try? Just for us?" Lily glanced around at all the faces staring at her. Some looked curious, Some looked skeptical, and a few looked downright unfriendly. Her stomach felt like it was full of butterflies. Doing backflips? I don't know, she said. What if I mess up? What if I sound terrible? And you sound terrible, Ms. Rodriguez said with a smile. So what? We're here to practice and learn and try new things. Nobody expects perfection. I do, Rebecca muttered under her breath, but loud enough for others to hear. Few kids giggled. Ms. Rodriguez heard it too, and her expression grew a little more serious. Rebecca, I think maybe you should sit down and give Lily some space. In fact, everyone should step back a bit. But Ms. Rodriguez, Rebecca protested, I was just trying to protect the piano. I mean, if someone doesn't know proper hand positioning, they could. The piano will be fine, Ms. Rodriguez said firmly. I think it's time we all remembered that this talent show is about encouragement and community. It's not about showing off or putting others down. The rebuke was gentle but clear, and Rebecca's face turned red. She wasn't used to being called out like this, especially not in front of other kids. She took a step back, but her expression was still skeptical. Meanwhile, Lily was having an internal war with herself. Part of her wanted to run away, to avoid the possibility of embarrassing herself in front of everyone. But another part of her, a part that was growing stronger by the minute, wanted to sit down at that beautiful piano and let the music out. You know what, Lily? Ms. Rodriguez said, as if she could read her thoughts. I've been doing this for a long time. And I've learned that the kids who are most nervous about sharing their talents are often the ones who surprise us the most. Really? Lily asked. Really? The kids who brag and show off usually sound exactly like you'd expect them to. But the quiet ones, the ones who play music because they love it rather than because they want to impress people, those are the ones who make magic happen. Lily felt something shift inside her chest. It was like a door opening or a light turning on. She looked at the piano again, and this time, instead of seeing an intimidating instrument that was too good for her, she saw possibility. What would I play? She asked, taking a tiny step toward the piano bench. Whatever you want, Ms. Rodriguez said. Whatever feels right to you. Rebecca made another small sound of disbelief. She doesn't even have sheet music. How is she supposed to play without sheet music? The same way people played music for thousands of years before sheet music was invented, Ms. Rodriguez replied. By listening to their hearts. Lily took another step toward the piano. Her hands were still shaking a little, but now it was more from excitement than fear. She could feel the melody building inside her, the same one that had been whispering. To her all afternoon, it's just ... she said, looking around at all the faces watching her. It's just that I've never played in front of people before. What if they don't like it? And they don't like it, Ms. Rodriguez said simply. But you know what I think? I think you might surprise yourself. And even if you don't, you'll have tried something new and brave. That's what matters. David, the quiet boy who had tried to defend her earlier, spoke up from the back of the group. I'd like to hear you play, he said. I think it would be cool. A few other kids nodded in agreement. Not all of them, but enough to give Lily a small boost of confidence. She looked at the piano bench just 3 feet away now. All she had to do was sit down and put her hands on the keys. All she had to do was trust the music that lived inside her. Okay, she said, so quietly that people had to strain to hear her. Okay, I'll try. Lily's legs felt like jelly as she walked those final 3 steps to the piano bench. The room had gone completely quiet now, except for the sound of her sneakers on the polished floor and her own heart beating so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. She sat down on the edge of the bench, just like she did at home with her little keyboard. But this felt so different. The bench was the perfect height, and it was padded and comfortable. The piano stretched out in front of her, like a beautiful smile of black and white keys. Looking down at her hands, Lily realized they were trembling. She pressed her palms together and took a deep breath, trying to calm herself down. Behind her, she could hear someone shifting their weight, and she knew that at least 20 pairs of eyes were watching her every move. Take your time, sweetheart, Ms. Rodriguez said softly. There's no rush. But Rebecca's voice cut through the gentle encouragement. This is ridiculous, she whispered to Chloe, but it was loud enough for everyone to hear. She's going to embarrass herself and waste everyone's time. Lily's shoulders tensed up. Maybe Rebecca was right. Maybe this was a terrible mistake. What if she sat down and couldn't remember how to play anything? What if her fingers froze up? What if the music that sounded so beautiful in her head came out as just noise on this fancy piano? She started to turn around, ready to stand up and apologize for wasting everyone's time. But then she caught sight of Ms. Rodriguez's face. The older woman was looking at her with such kindness and belief that it made Lily's chest feel warm. Behind Ms. Rodriguez, she could see David giving her an encouraging nod. More importantly, she could still hear it. The melody. It was still there in her mind, as clear and beautiful as ever. It was the song she had been humming to herself for weeks, the one that always made her feel better when she was sad. She had played it dozens of times on her broken keyboard at home, and each time it had sounded a little different, a little more complete. "You know what?" Lily said, surprised by the sound of her own voice. "I'm going to play something I wrote." "Wrote a song?" asked Ashley, and for the first time she didn't sound mean. She sounded genuinely surprised. "Well, I didn't write it down or anything," Lily said, positioning her hands over the keys. "I don't know how to do that, but I made it up. It's called ... It's called Home." Rebecca rolled her eyes. "Original," she muttered. But some of the other kids shushed her. Lily closed her eyes and let her fingers find middle C, the same key she had touched when this whole thing started. But this time, she didn't pull her hand away. Instead, she let her fingers settle naturally on the keys, the way they had learned to do through hundreds of hours of practice at home. The first note she played was soft and gentle. It hung in the air for a moment, pure and clear. Then came the second note, and the third. And suddenly the melody was flowing out of her like water from a spring. The song started quietly, almost like a lullaby. It was the sound of her apartment. Early in the morning, when everything was peaceful and still, her left hand found a simple rhythm on the lower keys while her right hand danced through the melodies she knew by heart. Within the first few measures, something magical happened. The room, which had been filled with tension and whispered comments, went completely silent. Not the uncomfortable silence of people waiting for something bad to happen, but the breathless silence of people who were hearing something beautiful. Lily's nervousness began to melt away as the music took over. This was what she had been born to do. Her fingers moved across the keys with a natural grace that no amount of formal training could teach. She wasn't thinking about technique or hand position or any of the things Rebecca had mentioned. Was just feeling the music and letting it flow. The melody grew a little stronger now, more confident. It was the sound of her mother coming home from work, tired but happy to see her daughter. It was the sound of Sunday mornings when they would make pancakes together and dance around their tiny kitchen. It was the sound of love in a small apartment where money was tight but the heart was full. Behind her closed eyelids, Lily could see her whole world. She could see her mother's smile, the way the afternoon light came through their window, the way their old couch looked with its faded floral pattern. All of these images flowed through her fingers and into the music. The piano responded to her touch like it had been waiting for her all its life. Every note was rich and full, nothing like the tinny sound of her keyboard at home. The lower notes rumbled with warmth, and the higher notes sparkled like stars. It was as if the piano itself was helping her tell her story as the song continued. Lily began to add little flourishes, small decorations to the melody that she had never tried before. Her left hand found a walking bass line that she didn't even know she knew. Her right hand discovered harmonies that made the simple melody sound suddenly complex and sophisticated. She could hear gasps of surprise from the audience, but they seemed to be coming from very far away. All that mattered was the music and the way it made her feel. For the first time since she had walked into this community center, she felt like herself. She felt strong and capable and beautiful. The song began to build now, growing more passionate and intense. This was the part about dreams, about the music that lived inside her and wanted to be shared with the world. Her fingers flew across the keys with increasing speed and confidence, creating runs and arpeggios that would have impressed any trained musician, but it wasn't showing off. Every note had meaning, every chord had emotion behind it. This was her story, her heart, her soul pouring out through her fingertips onto the keys of this beautiful instrument. Rebecca's mouth had fallen open somewhere around the first chorus. She stood frozen, unable to believe what she was hearing. This wasn't supposed to be possible. You couldn't just sit down at a piano without years of training and play something this beautiful. It went against everything her expensive teacher had told her. Chloe had tears in her eyes. She had never heard music that made her feel this way before, like someone was speaking directly to her heart in a language she didn't know she understood. Ashley had completely forgotten about her violin and her own upcoming performance. All she could do was listen and wonder how someone her own age could create something so incredibly moving. Even the parents who had been chatting quietly in their chairs had stopped talking. Several of them had pulled out their phones not to scroll through social media, but to record this unexpected moment of pure artistry. Ms. Rodriguez felt her own eyes filling with tears. In all her years of working with children, she had never witnessed anything quite like this. She had seen talented kids before, kids with good training and expensive instruments. But this was different. This was raw, natural talent combined with genuine emotion and an innate understanding of music that couldn't be taught. The song was building to its climax now. Lily's whole body was swaying gently with the rhythm as her hands moved across the keyboard with increasing intensity. The melody soared higher and higher, carrying everyone in the room along with it. And then, just when it seemed like the music couldn't get any more beautiful, Lily began to bring it back down. The powerful chords softened into gentle harmonies. The racing melody slowed to a peaceful walk. It was like watching the sun set after a perfect day. The final notes of Home floated through the air like a prayer, soft and sweet and full of love. Lily held the last chord for a long moment, letting it fade naturally until the room was completely silent once again. She opened her eyes and slowly lifted her hands from the keys, suddenly remembering where she was and what had just happened. For a moment that seemed to last forever, the room was completely silent. Lily sat at the piano bench with her hands still hovering over the keys, hardly daring to breathe. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, but she couldn't tell what they were thinking. Had she done something wrong? Had the music sounded as beautiful to them as it had felt to her? Then, like thunder after lightning, silence exploded into applause. It started with Ms. Rodriguez, who began clapping so enthusiastically that her clipboard fell to the floor with a loud clatter. Then David joined in, whistling and cheering from the back of the room. Within seconds, every single person in the community center was on their feet, clapping and cheering like they had just witnessed something magical, and they had. Lily turned around on the piano bench, her eyes wide with shock. She had never heard applause like this before. It wasn't polite clapping like when someone finished a school presentation. This was the kind of applause that came from the heart, loud and joyful and full of genuine appreciation. It was incredible, shouted one of the parents from the back. Absolutely incredible. I've never heard anything like it, said another voice. Even some of the older kids who had been practicing in the corner had stopped what they were doing and were clapping along with everyone else. A few of them were shaking their heads in amazement, as if they couldn't quite believe what they had just heard. But the biggest surprise of all was Rebecca. She was standing just a few feet away from the piano, and there were actual tears rolling down her cheeks. Her perfectly applied makeup was starting to smudge, but she didn't seem to care. For the first time all afternoon, she looked like what she really was, a little girl who had just heard something that touched her heart in a way she didn't understand. How did you... ... double quotes Rebecca started to say, then stopped. He wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and tried again. How did you learn to play like that? Lily stood up from the piano bench, still feeling a little shaky from the performance and the reaction. Just ... I don't know. I just played what I felt. But that melody, Rebecca continued, her voice softer than it had been all day. It was so beautiful. And those harmonies. My teacher has been trying to get me to play with that kind of feeling for months, but I never understood what she meant. Until now, Miss Rodriguez walked over and put a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. Sweetheart, that was one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. In all my years working here, I don't think I've ever seen a room full of people moved like that. Really? Lily asked, still hardly able to believe what was happening. Really, Ms. Rodriguez confirmed. You have a very special gift, Lily. What you just did. That's not something that can be taught. That comes from somewhere much deeper. More people were coming over now, wanting to talk to Lily and tell her how much they had enjoyed her performance. Parents were introducing themselves and asking if she would be performing in the talent show. Other kids were asking her to teach them the song she had just played. But it was Chloe's reaction that surprised Lily the most. The tall girl with braces who had been so mean earlier was now standing quietly beside Rebecca, looking ashamed of herself. I owe you an apology, Chloe said, her voice barely above a whisper. What I said before, about you not knowing what you were doing. I was wrong. Really, really wrong. Ashley nodded in agreement. We all were. I've been taking violin lessons for 3 years, and I've never made anyone feel the way your music just made me feel. It was like you were telling a story that everyone could understand, even without words. Lily felt her cheeks getting warm again, but this time it was from happiness instead of embarrassment. Thank you, she said. That means a lot. Where did you learn that song? Asked David, who had made his way over to the piano. I mean, you said you wrote it, but it sounded so ... professional. I've been working on it for a while, Lily explained. When my mom works late, I practice on my keyboard at home. This melody just came to me one day when I was thinking about all the things that make me happy. You should record it, suggested one of the parents. My daughter takes piano lessons, and her teacher is always looking for new pieces for her students to learn. Something with that much heart and soul. Kids would love to play music like that. Ms. Rodriguez was thinking the same thing, but on a much bigger scale. She had connections in the music community, teachers and performers who were always looking for young talent. What she had just witnessed wasn't just a talented child playing piano. This was something special, something that needed to be nurtured and developed. Lily, she said, can I ask you something? Would you be interested in taking some real piano lessons? I know a teacher who might be willing to work with you, and I think I could arrange for some financial assistance if that's something your family would want. Lily's heart skipped a beat. Real piano lessons? With a real teacher? It was something she had dreamed about but never thought was possible. I would love that, she said, her voice full of wonder. But are you sure? I mean, lessons cost a lot of money, and my mom already works so hard. Let me worry about that, Ms. Rodriguez said with a smile. There are programs and scholarships for kids with exceptional talent. And after what I just heard, I think you definitely qualify. Rebecca, who had been listening to this conversation, suddenly stepped forward. My teacher, she said quietly. Mrs. Chen. She's really good, and she's always talking about how important it is to have passion for music, I think. I think she would want to meet you. This was perhaps the most surprising turn of events yet. Rebecca, who had been so cruel and dismissive just an hour ago, was now offering to help. Would you really do that? Lily asked. Rebecca nodded, looking a little embarrassed but determined. What I did before, how I treated you, that was wrong. My mom always tells me that music is supposed to bring people together, not tear them apart. I forgot that today. We all did, added Chloe. I'm sorry too. We judged you before we even knew anything about you. Ashley spoke up as well. Maybe we could all practice together sometime? I mean, if you want to. I'd love to learn more about playing with feeling instead of just hitting the right notes. Lily looked around at all these kids who had been strangers, or even enemies just a short while ago, and now they were offering friendship and support. It felt like a dream, but the best kind of dream, the kind that actually comes true. I'd like that, she said. I'd like that a lot. Ms. Rodriguez clapped, her hands together. Well, then it's settled. Lily, you're definitely going to be in our talent show next month. Between now and then, we're going to make sure you have every opportunity to develop this incredible gift of yours. As the afternoon wound down and kids started getting picked up by their parents, word about Lily's performance spread throughout the community center and beyond. Parents called other parents, teachers texted colleagues, and by evening, there were already 3 different music teachers who had heard about the little girl with the extraordinary talent and wanted to meet her. But the most important call came. Later that night, when Ms. Rodriguez phoned Lily's mother at home, Mrs. Chen, she said, I think you should know that your daughter just changed a lot of lives today, including her own. And if you're willing, I'd love to talk to you about some opportunities that might help her music reach even more people. Lily went to bed that night. She could still hear the sound of applause ringing in her ears. But more than that, she could hear something else, the sound of her own voice, strong and confident, saying, I'm going to play something I wrote. For the first time in her life, she had shared her music with the world, and the world had listened. More importantly, the world had heard not just the notes she played, but the heart behind them, as she drifted off to sleep. Lily was already thinking about the next song she wanted to write, and all the people she wanted to share it with. The little girl who had been too shy to speak up that morning had found her voice through music, and she was never going to let anyone tell her to be quiet again.